As Russia and Ukraine are about to enter another round of negotiations, the Kremlin have released their demands for what they want to see if they are to stop their invasion of Ukraine. So, let's get into it. This from Common Dreams. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov outlined Russia's demands in a phone interview with Reuters ahead of a third round of negotiations between Russian and Ukrainian diplomats on Monday, as the civilian death toll from the invasion continues to mount and the refugee crisis worsens. So, the demands here listed by Kyiv Independent on Twitter, saying Russia claims it will stop the war immediately if Ukraine agrees to 1. Cease military action, which, come on, there's military action from Ukrainians as a defense mechanism because they're being invaded by Russia. But anyways, going on. Change constitution to enshrine neutrality, more on that in a minute. Recognize Crimea as Russian territory and recognize the Russian-controlled areas of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. Now, before I even get to the neutrality aspect of this, what's really weird about this is mentioned here by Mehdi Hassan, who writes, all of these three things were de facto the case prior to the start of this conflict. Personally, I hope that some deal can be done and lives can be saved in Ukraine before this illegal invasion and refugee crisis escalates further. So he's right. While they were not legally the case, not written down, these were all already de facto the case. So Russia appears to now have tried to, or is trying to use this invasion to put pressure on Ukraine to legally recognize what was already de facto being recognized. Now, that doesn't mean that Ukraine's going to agree to this. In fact, I don't think they will, largely because Putin's invasion here has sort of given them a reason to not remain neutral. And that's, out of all of these, I think that's likely the biggest issue here is forcing or asking them to remain neutral after you just invaded their country. But also, another big issue is, how can you possibly trust that Russia's going to agree to any kind of deal here when they have already broken a deal they made just a few days ago? So I covered how Ukraine and Russia had agreed to a quasi or a temporary ceasefire to evacuate some civilians from Ukraine. Well, in the process of doing that, Russian forces intensified their shelling of the very city that they were trying to evacuate civilians from. So if they're breaking these ceasefires, how can you trust them when it comes to making any kind of agreement like this? And as I mentioned, again, Zelensky, I don't think has any interest in remaining neutral. He's already tried to, or is appealing to the EU to join the EU. The EU has recognized their application. So I don't know. Not to mention, of course, NATO as well. I'm sure he, while there's no agreements or anything moving forward on that, he also has a desire to join NATO. And again, Putin's move here sort of gives him the excuse that he needs to show why he wants to join NATO. So I just don't, I can't envision a deal happening that rests on them remaining neutral here in any sort of, legal form. Also, just worth mentioning here, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov added that Russia is, quote, finishing the demilitarization of Ukraine, which is a ridiculous line, but denied that it is seeking to seize Ukrainian territory or oust the country's national leadership. Quote, Ukraine is an independent state that will live as it wants, but under conditions of neutrality, said Peskov. So there were reports out claiming that Russia or Putin wanted to essentially get rid of Zelensky. That appears to not be the case, at least according to their spokesperson here. They appear to be okay with Zelensky remaining in power in Ukraine, as long as those two states to their east remain independent. More here. This is part of the reason I think why maybe Russia, or I should say Putin, is feeling the pressure to come to some kind of agreement here, or at least put forward that he is, trying to or pretending to come to some kind of agreement, as he's feeling a lot of pressure both from inside and outside the country. So thousands have been arrested in Russia as they have joined global anti-war protests. So around 4,500 is the estimation. Russians in Russia have been arrested for protesting against this invasion. So he's feeling at least a bit of pressure, if he cares at all I mean, I'm sure he doesn't really care all that much, but he's feeling a little pressure, at least from people in Ukraine, or sorry, in Russia. And also, forces in Ukraine have been a lot more successful, I think, than Putin expected. So this is one example, but there are many examples like this where Ukrainian forces have taken back an airport, and that's according to a regional governor there, Vitaly Kim. So there's several examples of Ukrainian forces taking back land that Russia had initially taken. So Russian forces, a lot of them, I mean, there's videos and videos out about this, showing that they're kind of confused as to why they're there. They don't know why they're there. There's one video I saw of one soldier was crying as he's being berated by Ukrainians about why are you in our country. There's other videos of Russian tanks running out of fuel. Like, it's just, it seems very, I don't know, poorly planned because of how successful Ukraine has been in pushing back their military. And also, I'm sure they're feeling a little pressure from these sanctions, even though largely the sanctions on Russia are hurting Russian citizens as opposed to really damaging the people in power there. But still, these are other pressure points that are potentially being, are a part of the equation when it comes to Putin wanting to try and have some kind of deal here. But ultimately, I don't know what the solution is here. I'm not going to pretend to know the solution. I'm not going to pretend to be, the all-knowing expert on this. But ultimately, I just find it tough to imagine an agreement like this being agreed to by Ukraine when we have seen both Russia's ability to break previous agreements and also, because of the invasion, giving Ukraine and Zelensky a reason to want to not stay independent, not stay neutral. But we're going to have to see where this all goes.